Today I'm in the Himalayas and I'm thinking about transformation, how photography can transform a moment and transform the subject. And then through that process, as photographers, we can transform ourselves. As we talk about transformation today, I will also walk you through some of my photographs of butterflies and birds in Bhutan. Today I want to begin with the butterflies and how they have transformed how I see the Himalayas. These are such incredible and detailed creatures and fascinating subjects to explore as a photographer. With the help of a macro lens, the miniature world that exists at our feet suddenly comes into view. Tiny little wings that flitter away in the distance are brought into focus and made larger than life. Did you know that the scientific name for butterflies is scaly wing? That all makes a lot more sense once you get close enough to photograph at the macro level. One of the joys of shooting butterflies for me is how they become a doorway to slowing down your experience with nature. Sometimes I walk into an open field and all I see is grass. I squint to see if there are flowers or other tiny details that my brain has learned to overlook. I start really observing the habitat and I just look. My eyes soon start to begin to see things, lots of little things. I might notice what kind of flowers are poking through the grass, or the different kinds of grass, or the beetles and other bugs that call the fields home. I might notice strange caterpillars that in a few weeks will transform into the very butterflies I'm trying to photograph. And soon I start to notice the butterflies all around me. Little orange ones, large black ones, powder blue ones that flit without stopping at all, earthy brown ones that rest on trees and just disappear into the forest the minute they sit still. From a distance, the colours can be hard to make out. Through a macro lens, however, the riot of colours, the joyous riot of colours, are properly revealed. I remember staying in a hotel just outside of Paro in Bhutan, and my friend came to visit and we stood outside in the garden just talking. He was trying to describe a particular butterfly to me, a bright blue one that he remembers from when he was a kid. But as an adult, he was struggling to remember the last time he even saw one. It was a surreal moment for me because I'd just been photographing bright blue butterflies in this very garden. That morning, I noticed that a few of them tended to come back to the same patch of flowers, just a few feet away from where we were talking. So I scanned the meadow right next to us, and sure enough, there he was, a little azure sapphire. He was displaying his fancy colours in the hope that the girls might notice. My friend looked at me in disbelief and joy, and then did his best to get a few shots with his iPhone. This is one of those times when a specific piece of camera gear can really make a difference to your photography. It can transform how you go about taking your photos. Not just the detail you get from a good macro lens, but the flexibility to compose and work with light as well. I have a friend who is a bug expert, and her macro photography is all about maximum detail. She wants depth of field, she wants lots of light, she wants to see the features that identify one species from another. I do not. I want a beautiful photograph that makes art with light and depth and a butterfly. So we each use the macro gear in a very, very different way. My style with macro is all about leaning into the bokeh and the layers of texture taking place at the scale of a butterfly. A simple flower becomes a rich highlight embraced by dreamy soft tones and layers of leaves and grass when you're shooting with a fast macro lens. Even better if there's a butterfly hiding in there somewhere too. Shooting at f2.8 with a macro lens, plus a camera body with sensor stabilization and excellent autofocus, means I don't need flash or a tripod, which means I can compose freeform. I can look for moments where the light is creating composition for me. My photography can be guided by the light. When I first started capturing butterflies, I was so excited just to get a glimpse into their tiny little world. Everything was new to me. Often I was rushing the moment and I wasn't always working compositions, but just firing off shots. But each time I stepped out to capture butterflies, I became a little bit more aware of how they move, how one species behaves differently to another, how much time I really have to grab a shot before they fly away, and how far I can push my luck when trying to get closer. Some species are more patient with a photographer than others. Some individuals are more tolerant of my lens than others. The more patient I am with these opportunities, the more I began to transform my captures from photography into art. Because my goal is to capture beautiful photos, not just to take photos of beautiful things. That's the transformation I'm looking for when I'm chasing bugs with a camera. With the right lens and a generous amount of time, my creative vision begins to find form. One of the key differences in photographic style between myself and my friend, the bug expert, is how we use light. It's not just that I need less light, working at f2.8, letting the ISO of the camera boost my shutter speed, but I get to enjoy more variety in light. I'm seeking out those moments where the light is doing something interesting or something complex. That's where the magic happens for me. I don't want ordinary light, and I'm searching for light coming through the lens in ways I didn't expect. I love to let the light surprise me. Cameras don't see subjects, they see light. So the easiest way to transform a composition with your creative eye is to work with the light, not against it. The way light moves through a scene is the most fundamental way I know to transform a capture. For example, I can't imagine ever wanting to shoot with light that's flat behind me. I want to shoot across the light or into it or a combination of both. I want the flare to hit my lens and paint in a little chaos in the foreground. I want the bokeh to pop on the edges of flowers in the background. I want the chaos of natural sunlight and all the opportunities that brings. Light transforms the image, but so does the photographer. I know this probably sounds painfully obvious, but stop and think about what that means for a minute. We, as a photographer, we hold the camera in our hands. We decide what is worth capturing and what is not. We decide what the story is. We get to decide whether to transform that moment into a celebration of grandeur or a reflection of tragedy. We are the narrator. We are still making those choices long after the capture. We make similar choices when we curate images into a collection and share them. The way we present images is critical to how they are received. It is true when curating for a gallery, for a book, or even social media. Bringing the right series of images together can build your narrative. If a picture tells 1,000 words, a collection of images can reveal the whole story, or at least the version of the story you wish to tell. My last exhibition was just before COVID, a project funded by the LUMIX brand. I wanted to tell a story about conservation in the Himalayas, and they wanted to launch a brand new camera. So we made a deal to help each other. My original proposal underwent something of a transformation, however. They ended up inviting a celebrity to join me in Bhutan for the shoot. So now my task was to bring together two very different photographic perspectives on two very different camera systems, a micro four thirds and a full frame, and somehow tell a coherent story. I took Australian TV personality Ray Martin to Bhutan for 10 days and introduced him to why I love this part of the world. Ray was an excellent companion, in fact. He's a sharp fellow and just good company. At the time, Ray didn't do much in the way of processing photos. So after our travels together, he came down to Melbourne with a collection of SD cards and we tried to assemble an exhibition. My original concept was long lost by this stage. I'd started with grand ideas of portraits of people displayed alongside portraits of birds and connecting the two stories between those individuals and their experience in the Himalayan wilderness. A different narrative came out of the photos, however. As I dug through Ray's images, I looked for the journalistic eye behind his shots and eventually settled on a formula. Fair to say, Ray was a little put out that I didn't use more of his photos in the final exhibition. Sometimes you just have to follow the story to where it takes you. Either it's there in the photos or it's not. When it comes to curating a gallery set or book, I usually advise to people, don't mix colour with black and white. For this collection, I ended up mixing colour with black and white. My concept for presenting these images was that every frame print on the wall would be a square, 30 by 30 inches. Most of those prints were broken into quads, so there were 4 squares within a square, roughly 15 by 15 inches each. With a few exceptions, the birds were printed in colour, while the rest of the story was in black and white. And this gave us a separation between the wilderness and the culture. Because the foundation of this exhibition was always about the birds and their conservation. I wanted to transform my bird photos into something more. I wanted to bring in the stories behind the photos. For example, the park rangers who had never seen a parrotbill until I showed them one I photographed a few months earlier. I had photographed this bird in their patch of forest. It was a bird that the park rangers didn't know existed, which is exactly the power of photography and the message I wanted to share. We can use photography to raise awareness of our wilderness so everyone understands better why we need to preserve it. The stories behind the photos are what mattered for this exhibition. I wanted to tell the story of the park rangers. I wanted to portray the contrast between domestic animals in the villages versus birds in the wild. I wanted to show where the habitat of humans connects with the habitat of wildlife and how the two are not necessarily in conflict. What we ended up with was a very different exhibition to what I had originally planned. But that's what happens when you follow the story to discover where it takes you. That's what makes for an exhibition experience that is most genuine for the audience and most rewarding for the photographer.
Big wide sweep, they're slowly gaining height. This is what we want. Sneaking up on them through the paddocks. I think it's going to be a beautiful scene if we can get through these farms. They come in, you could just sort of zoom out and go right overhead, and that light would have been fantastic. I think that's what Ray had, so maybe he's got the shot.
They just performed for me. They just flew over my head, and they kept coming, and they kept coming, and not just in pair here or half a dozen there, but dozens of them. It was a beautiful moment. I felt really privileged. In fact, I couldn't stop taking photographs.
Two things have transformed my photography over the years. The first was buying a very fast wide-angle lens, and the second was having time to follow my creative path. I've talked specifically about time before, so I'll pop a link below to that video as well. The short version is that the best way to get better at photography is to spend more time doing it. Of course, what you mean by being better at photography might mean different things to different people. And just defining what kind of photographer you want to be is a big step towards that transformation. Once you know where you want your journey to take you, the only reasonable step left is to make time to make that journey. You need to invest time to be your best. You also need some gear. You can't be a photographer if you don't have a camera. There's a tricky paradox when it comes to acquiring the gear you need for your journey. How do you learn what gear you really need if you haven't had a chance to try out that gear? How do you know if your current gear is holding you back at all? How do you know which lens is the one lens that will suddenly unlock all the magic? Is it really possible for one lens to suddenly change everything? I know this won't apply to everyone out there, but for me, it absolutely did. I have a policy of buying myself one new lens every year. Not because I need to own dozens of lenses, but purely as a treat for myself. I want to have a chance to try out lenses that are outside my comfort zone precisely because that's where you find new horizons and new opportunities. My other reasoning is if the lens doesn't spark joy for me after a year or so, then I can always sell it again. This was how I came to purchase a 24mm f1.4 for my old DSLR. I already knew I liked composition with a fast prime lens. 50mm f1.2 was my daily drive. Taking that same approach but stepping back to 24mm was a game changer for me. It transformed how I look at shooting wide. Suddenly I could work depth into a much wider scene while still working focus and bokeh. For me, so many moments that were nice at 50mm became powerful at 24. I was capturing so much more of the story. I liked it so much that I quickly realised I wouldn't mind shooting f1.4 with an even wider focal length. I covered that in another video too, so I'll pop a link up to that as well. Having the opportunity to look at my photography with a fast and wide lens absolutely transformed my creative path and my earning potential as well. Once you've found the right bit of magic sauce to work into your craft, you need to get out there and explore the boundaries. Gear is handy, but spending time is essential. The final thing that transformed my life as a photographer was the internet. It absolutely transformed the world I live in, and for me it came along just at the right time to make my career change. Digital cameras, websites, and eventually social media all happened at a time in my life that allowed me to step away from a day job and immerse myself into a creative freelance career. If we were all still shooting film, I doubt I would ever have had the resources to start that new career. The investment required to shoot film back in those days was huge. It was a big hurdle to learning and a big hurdle to career change. Digital consumption of photography has also brought about a rise in demand for quality photography, and that has fueled an amazing opportunity for someone like me to find paid work capturing beautiful images. Ironically, all these years later, I think it's social media that's actually doing the most damage to photography as an art form. The speed and pace of how people digest images on Instagram these days is destroying the value of photography itself. Instead of reflecting and digesting the power of a photo, we click then flick through a torrent of non-stop imagery. And increasingly, that deluge of pictures are fake or AI generated. They aren't real in the first place. Once the flood has passed, your photos simply sink to the bottom of the ocean with all the other trash. Engagement on social media is now measured in nanoseconds instead of minutes. That's if the algorithm even lets your image be seen. Photographs are not deemed to have the impact of shouty reels and shorts. Where once we walked around a gallery and contemplated the work of fine photographers, today we get assaulted with attention-seeking videos from a never-ending pipeline of content. In the absence of magazines and galleries, the experience of consuming photography has been transformed into clickbait. What I've been going through in recent years is the need to transform my own experience of photography. It's the reason I started this YouTube channel, to create a way to share my photography as an experience for others to enjoy. Actually printing out your photographs and seeing them inked on paper is one of the most transformative moments I can think of. We do this on a couple of my workshops, and it's pure magic seeing someone hold a giant print of a photo they captured just a few hours before, looking deep into the texture of the paper, absorbing the rich tones and hues, and marveling at the detail and the nuance found within a large print. In that moment, we see someone understand just what they are capable of. They are empowered by a simple print. What interests me most about mentoring photographers is observing what exactly ends up transforming someone's creativity. I love it when we get to witness those moments firsthand and get to see that spark ignite in their eyes. It's really something. This is where I want to hear from you as well. Please do drop a comment below and tell me what happened on your journey to reach that point of transformation. When did you stop taking photographs of interesting things and start finding your art with the camera? How did you feel when you first saw a large print of something you captured? Creating an exhibition is a deeply personal and emotional challenge. The prints that end up hanging on the wall are not merely copies of a digital file. They are so much more than that. They've been made flesh and they take on a personality now. They are unique and irreplaceable. They are the culmination of months, maybe years of intense work and creative energy. It is as if they have a soul, born of my drive to create and share what makes this world beautiful. In the act of printing, we transform pixels into something tangible and valuable. They are our expression and ideas made real in a way that no Instagram post could ever touch. Can you imagine taking all that effort and work from an exhibition and say, just throwing it all in the dumpster? Unlike Instagram, we'd never do that to a beautifully framed print that was the center of an exhibition. Hanging prints on a wall transforms all that effort and emotion into something real. Like a butterfly awakening from its pupa, it takes flight.
One day we went to a little farming community, and Ewan had come with some photographs printed that he'd taken last time. And the children came as though we were Santa Claus, as though we'd suddenly arrived with these gifts. And they looked at them and they laughed and they were embarrassed a little to see themselves, and then asked to take another one. We take for granted, we take snaps of the family at home, and suddenly for them this is this amazing, magical gift that had arrived with these photos. They'd never seen their own image. So to come along with a camera and take a photograph that is a real portrait, and then they can look at it, is kind of special.
I don't know what the future is for social media. There was a time when the online space felt pretty real and sharing your curated work on Facebook was rewarding. I no longer feel that way. Most social media platforms are just using your hard work and effort to sell ads that don't work anyway. You are the product, not Instagram. YouTube is not so different, of course, but if you've stuck around to this stage of my video, then you've already had more time to contemplate my photography and my ideas than you would from a decade of my Instagram posts. Ironically, it is precisely because the world of printed photographs has become less common that such an experience is ever more important. If you get a chance to exhibit and hang your prints on the wall, I recommend you do just that. Do it with your camera club, do it with your local cafe, do it with an art fair or with a photography festival. Exhibiting is not an easy path. It takes time, it takes money, and it takes guts. You're putting your soul on display in the process, and not everyone will see the value in what you're doing. It is confronting, and without doubt, you will learn a lot about yourself in the process. And that's the point, really. Curating and sharing your work in public may or may not transform the perception of an audience, but it absolutely will transform you. Thanks for hauling all the way through this one. Please like and subscribe, and I hope you have a great day out there in the real world.